crush me, I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass, and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again, like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone. This letter was once again signed simply The Watcher. At this point, the police thought maybe there was the chance, based on how this person had played inside the home, that it was a child of someone who had once worked for the original owners, but they weren't able to, find anyone like that. So that theory kind of was thrown out the window. After this third letter, though, Derek and Maria installed a security alarm and decided that they would not be moving in to this house right away. After installing the security system, the alarm went off several times in the middle of the night. Something ended up tripping the alarm, and Derek would always go and check things out, but was unable to find anything. Derek even spent several nights just in a sleeping bag, basically watching out the windows to see if he could spot anything, but he never once saw anything at all. So it was just very, very odd. Like I was saying earlier, the police believed it was someone who lived nearby, especially since the letters were sent through the mail and they had gone through the local post office only. I told you about the direct neighbors that were brought up as a concern to the Broaddus family, and the police ended up questioning these neighbors. questioned her as well, but didn't get anywhere. She was perceived by the neighbors to be more normal, so if she was indeed the watcher or the one writing these letters, she might have still continued to write them and not confess to anything. At this point, Derek and Maria decided they were not comfortable moving into the new house at all, especially since the alarms kept getting tripped at night. They felt on edge and did not feel comfortable moving somewhere when the police were unable to determine who in fact was writing and sending these letters. At this point, the Pradas family had to move out of their original home since, like I said earlier, it had been sold. They chose to move in with Maria's parents, who still lived in Westfield. At this point, the Protestants tried to sell this home, and they even tried to allow the home to be torn down and the lot split into two separate lots and have two new houses built. But the city did not allow this to happen, and no one budged at trying to purchase the home. At this point, the Pradas family had sued the Woods family for not making them aware of the letter they received from the Watcher, as they felt that was a threatening letter and should have been disclosed on their closing date for the house. When that happened, however, the story of the Watcher and the letters ended up leaking out, and the public found out about it. So, this was not good for the Pradas family, as half of the town thought they were making this story up, either to receive insurance money or, selling the house for more money, and the other half did believe them. The Pradas family at this point was just upset, and they 657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates. My soldiers of the boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher. At this point, the renter's family and his name was mentioned in the letter. Then the letter continued on, saying that revenge could come in many forms. Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones break. This was simply signed once again. The Watcher. So at this point, the renter and his family agreed to stay in the house, but only if the Broaddus's would install cameras, which they agreed to that. But nothing was ever caught on camera at all. That was the last letter that the Watcher would ever send to the house at 657 Boulevard. Eventually, this renter and his family ended up moving out, but not due to any of these letters from the Watcher. It just happened that it was time for them to move on. The Broaddus family once again